Buddhist or a Hindu or an atheist. What makes Christianity unique? That is the question that we will address in the second talk. So I hope that you continue with me also in the second talk as well. So let's begin with this. Is there a God? I want to ask you, and I hope I can make this more interactive than not. So I want to ask you this question. Raise your hand and help me out. If you are asked this question, let's say you have a friend who's seeking, divine transcendence, whatever that is. And he sees you or she sees you praying or reading the Bible, and then they ask you this question. Do you believe in God? Does God really exist? What would you say? Raise your hand and tell me. Okay, well, yes, you'll say yes. But then they're going to ask you another question. Can you prove that to me? Because I am seeking what you're doing. Do you have evidence for His existence? What would you say? You're going to have to work with me. Raise your hand and tell me. Yes. Raise your hand? No? Okay. Don't move. Yes. Yeah, tell me, Justina.
Okay. I'll use an example that you gave me a long time ago. The tomb is empty. Where's the body?
Excellent. The tomb of Christ. Where is the body? This is the answer to the second talk. Why Christianity? But I'm talking, even before we talk about Christ and Christianity, I'm just saying, does God even exist? And do we have evidence for His existence? Yes, sir. Thank you. Turn it on. That's okay. There you go. It's working.
Okay. There's evidence for the creation of the universe within the universe, and there's evidence that without a creator, it would be extremely improbable that we would all be here in the way we are. So things like the Goldilocks zone, the Earth, and things like that.
Excellent. Excellent. What's your name?
Amir.
Amir, beautifully said. Beautiful. What else? Yes, go ahead. Hold on. Get the microphone first.
For me, I feel like I read some apologetics and stuff, but I can't remember anything. But for me, any organization, any group of people, it has to be a leader.
I can't hear you. Speak in the microphone, please.
Any organization or group, there has to be a leader.
A leader?
A leader,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot say the universe just brought itself without having a leader. It has to have someone to, organize it or discipline it or whatever.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, one more. Yes.
I think this is going off of Amir's point. It's the fine-tunement of everything, like the fine-tunement of humanity, the emotions, the brain, the logic, the ethics. We're so much more advanced than literally everything around us. And so if we compare Earth and the people on it compared to everything else, there must be something there.
Excellent. Beautiful. All right, so this is a great segue to the first point, but I'll give you a quick intro. Excellent. I'm glad to hear that from you. This question, is there a God, is, I believe, the most important question we can answer. The most important question. From this question flows a lot of consequences to our lives. Because this question will dictate how we live our lives, how we treat others, how we look at various events in this world. Most important of all questions, every single Christian must be ready to answer this question: is there a God? So let me give you what others claim. The atheist says there's no God. Al-Mulhid, the atheist, says there's no God. The alpha in Greek is lack of or opposite of. Theos means God. So atheos means no God. Okay? The theist, those who believe in God, say there is a God. The agnostic, do you know who the agnostics are? Remember, the A is no or opposite of. Gnosis means to know. In Greek, gnosis means to know. That's why in English, the verb to know begins with the K that we don't pronounce, because it came from kno. You see, because it's originally Greek. So agnosis means I don't know. So agnostic says, I don't know if God exists or not. And then the skeptic says, I doubt. I'm skeptical. I doubt that God exists. So which one is right? You could have an atheist that says God doesn't exist. You can have a theist that says, no, God exists. Agnostic says, I don't know. The skeptic says, I doubt it. Who's right? What do? We need to examine what? The evidence. That's the key word that we'll repeat quite a bit this morning. Examine the evidence. And we're not going to have time to go over all these 10 questions, but these 10 questions do demand an answer, coherent answer from everyone. Theist, agnostic, atheist, no matter what, you must provide a logically coherent, intellectually coherent answer to these 10 questions. We'll cover the first 2 for the sake of time, in the interest of time. The first question, which you all mentioned, where did the universe come from? This is the law called the law of, or the principle of sufficient reason in philosophy. And we'll discuss this in details as we go. But let me just give you the 10 questions first. Where did the universe come from? Secondly, where did life come from? The origin of life. Where did that come from? Thirdly, you said that beautifully, is there a designer behind the design? This is another argument for the existence of God that is called the teleological argument, or the argument from design. This design, this intricate design, this universe points to a designer. Just like this icon points to an iconographer, the design of this universe points to a designer. Okay? Number 4, who determines what is right and what is wrong? Who's to say this is right and this is wrong? Does society determine right and wrong? Does evolution determine right and wrong? Do I determine what is right and what is wrong? Or does a transcendent divine being who is morally perfect determines what is right and what is wrong? And how can I make that case logically, reasonably, without using verses from the scriptures? You see? Number 5, what is the purpose of my life? Why am I here? What's the meaning of life? Am I just here to go to school, graduate, get a job, get married, have kids, die, retire and die, and that's all what life is all about? What is the purpose of life and the meaning? What gives life meaning, rather? Number 6, what happens beyond the grave? What happens when I die? Do I just cease to exist? Or is there life beyond this earthly life? Number 7, now we get a little philosophical. Do you trust your mind? Do you trust in what your mind tells you or points towards? Number 8, do you have a soul, or are you just made up of molecules, and as some atheists say, we are moist robots? Yani we're basically machines, programmed, conditioned to say certain things and to act in certain ways. That leads to another question. Do you have free will? Because on atheism, according to atheism, you're not free. You are determined. Atheism leads to a philosophy or ideology called naturalism. And naturalism leads to fatalism. A lot of isms today, malish. Okay. Fatalism means I'm determined. I have no free will to say what I want to say or to do what I want to do. And if you listen to folks like famous atheists like Richard Dawkins. Anyone of you heard of Richard Dawkins? You have? Okay. Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, all those famous atheists who have written scores of books on atheism, that's what they say. As an atheist, I don't have free will. I'm predetermined. Now, just to pause for a second, I would love to ask one of those atheists who says that I don't have free will. I'm programmed to do certain things and to act certain ways. Try to tell your wife that. Honey, I programmed to love you. Love will be meaningless if it's not freely given and freely received. Do you know what I mean? Because that's what love means. Anyways, number 10, do you have absolute knowledge? Do you have absolute perfect knowledge to say, as an atheist, to say, I can prove the non-existence of God? In philosophy, by the way, my background is in philosophy and psychology, so I'm going to use a lot of critical thinking methodologies with you. In philosophy, you cannot prove the negative. You cannot say, I can prove to you the non-existence of God, because this requires what? Omniscience. What is omniscience? For you to know everything all the time about everyone. To be all-knowing. If you're an all-knowing person, then you can say, I can prove to you. You know, like what? Like when you say, I can prove to you that in this universe, there is no stone that is 3 by 5 inches that is red with black dots on it. I can prove to you that none of these stones exist in this entire universe. What does that mean? That I have searched the entire universe. That's what proving the negative means. You can't do that logically. So these are 10 questions on, hello, on atheism. It's okay, it's all good. I just thought you were going to jump or something. On atheism, according to atheism, I am yet, and I spoke, I've been in this ministry through the grace of God for almost 2 decades now, since 2001. And I've spoken to so many atheists on college campuses, universities, conferences, meetings, and all of that. And I've asked so many atheists some of these questions. I am yet to find a coherent answer to these questions. So as I said, I am yet to find a good, intellectually cohesive, coherent answer to these questions. So here you go. Before I say I have evidence for the existence of God, you know what's a good tactic to use? To reverse the burden of proof. Yani, okay, you as an atheist say, I don't believe in God. Why? Because of all this evil in this world. I hear this all the time. I'm sure you all do. You all do hear this all the time. You know, scholars say the problem of evil in this world is the rock of atheism. Yani sakhrat al-ilhad, the rock of atheism. Atheists don't believe in God because of all the evil in this world. I say, okay, fine. You don't believe in God because of all the evil in this world. What is your solution to the problem of evil, Mr. Atheist? Reverse the burden of proof. Yani, I am not the only one that is supposed to defend my position. Why don't you also defend your position? In legal terms, reversing the burden of proof works beautifully. You know what the response is for the problem of evil and suffering? Oh well, nature does its thing. It is what it is. And they say a few other colorful words, you know, blank happens and all of these wonderful things. That's what they say, that's what they do. There's no response to the problem of evil and suffering. As a matter of fact, they cannot even define what evil is. That's why Richard Dawkins went on record in his book, The Selfish Gene, and he said, there is no good, there's no evil in this world. It's just DNA dancing to its music. That's what he said. And I'm quoting him. Of course you can't define evil. Because for you to say this is evil, you must acknowledge the existence of what? Good. Because evil is a deprivation or deviation from good. Well, how do you know what good is? There must be a law by which you determine what is good and what is evil. Well, who put that law? There must be a lawgiver. But that's whom you're trying to disprove, not prove. So evil exists, the existence of evil proves theism, not atheism. So anyways, let's not get into the problem of evil, but these are 10 questions. We'll just, for the sake of time, we'll go over the first 2. Where did the universe come from? That's the question of all questions. There are 4 possible explanations. And these are four possible schools of thought. I did not come up with those explanations. These are yani, ideologies or, as I said, schools of thought that have come up with these explanations. The first, which is most ridiculous of them all, is that the universe came from nothing. I'm not sure if you've heard of someone by the name of Lawrence Krauss. Any of you heard of Lawrence Krauss? You have. Excellent. Quantum physicist from Arizona State University in the States. And he wrote a book called A Universe from Nothing. Now I found the answer to this question. I know where the universe came from. Nothing. Very interesting. We don't have time to debunk this ideology because it's very ridiculous, because nothing comes from nothing. Do you know what the word nothing is made up of? No thing. So how can a thing come from a no thing? It doesn't make sense. Nothing comes from nothing. The other possibility, self-made, created itself, eternal, or created. And as I mentioned, did it come from nothing? It doesn't make sense. Look at what Robert Jastrow, he's an agnostic astronomer, he's an atheist, so all the quotes I'm going to share with you are all from atheists. So that you don't think they're biased or anything like that. They're all atheists. And this is what they said based on their studies and their scientific research. He said the creation of matter out of nothing would violate the principle of the conservation of matter and energy, which states that matter and energy can be neither created nor destroyed. And I think he knows a thing or two about matter and energy given his credentials. Okay. Is it self-created? Some people say, famous atheists, I believe it's Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, Immanuel Kant, the other philosopher, they say that the universe just made up itself, created itself. Now I want you to tell me, is this possible? Is it logical to say that the universe created itself? Yes or no? And if no, why not? Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I want to hear someone who hasn't spoken. Yes.
So in order for something to create itself at a certain point of time, there must have been like the first thing to create something else. So that still points towards creation.
Yep, or you can put it another way and you can say, go ahead. Very good. Because for you to create yourself, you must first exist prior to yourself. So in essence, you must exist and not exist in the same time. That's a logical impossibility. It doesn't make sense. Okay, number 3. Well, let me give you a quote here before I go to number 3. Francis Collins, geneticist, and he's got all these credentials, and he wrote a wonderful book called The Language of God. He said, I cannot see how nature could have created itself. Only a supernatural force that is outside of space and time could have done that. Francis Collins was an atheist throughout his life, and because of his science and his true search, or his genuine search for the truth, he became a believer in God because of his science. And then he wrote this statement when he was an atheist. A supernatural force must be out of space and time could have done that. Tayyib. Here is the third and the most commonly used explanation for the existence of this cosmos, of this universe. It's always been there. It's eternal, and that's what it's called, the Immanuel Kant assertion, because this is the person who came up with it. Now, can you raise your hand and tell me, true or false? And if you're a scientist or an engineer or a physicist, you'll tell me why false. Yes, sir. Exactly, beautifully said. The universe is expanding. I'm not saying that it's expanding. That's what physics and scientists say and claim. And because it's expanding, it points to the fact that there is a point of beginning. And if there's a beginning, there must be a beginner. Okay, why else? And this is not a physics lesson or a science lesson, but I'll tell you very briefly some of the reasons why the universe does indeed have a beginning. Science has proven conclusively, and not through theists or researchers, atheist researchers, have proven the fact that the second law of thermodynamics, the motion of the galaxies, the radiation background of the universe, the cooling rate of radiation, all of these parameters and things prove one simple truth. The universe did have a beginning. Second law of thermodynamics that says that the world will go from order to disorder, and it will reach eventually a state of what? Entropy, which basically says that the world will be inevitably desolate and inhospitable to human life, but we haven't reached that point yet, which means that the world is not eternal. It did have a beginning. So in conclusion, if the universe did not come from nothing, it did not create itself, it is not eternal, then by process of elimination, if you take multiple choice questions, if it's not A, B, or C, then most likely it is D. Then it's created. Did I say it was created by God? No. I just said the universe. Now, logically speaking, I arrived at this conclusion that the universe is created. Now, let's look at a couple of quotes. Alexander Vilenkin, an authority figure in physics and cosmology, he says, another atheist, all the evidence we have says that the universe had a beginning. And as I said, because it did have a beginning, it must have a beginner. So this first cause, I know حضرتك قلتي leader, but I would change the word leader with cause, which I think synonymous in this case. The first cause of this universe must be outside this universe. And this universe is made up of what? As you can see on the screen. Physics tell us the universe is made up of what? Space, time, and matter. That's it. These are the three elements that make up this cosmos that we live in. So, if space, time, and matter did have a beginning, then the beginner or the cause of space, time, and matter must be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. In other words, transcendent, outside, beyond space, time, and matter. Okay? So, not only that, but that first cause, the beginner, that caused this universe must also have additional attributes. Not only spaceless, timeless is infinite in this case, immaterial, but they also must be very powerful, omnipotent, extremely powerful to create this universe out of nothing and to create it with the parameters and the details and the design that we have in this universe. Not only that, but that first cause must be a person, not some kind of vague energy or force or anything like that. Must be a person. Why? To choose to create. Because matter doesn't have a mind to choose to create. Only mind can choose to create. Only mind can have the will to create. Matter doesn't. You can leave this pew here for 500 years and it will still be there. It will not bring another pew next to it because it doesn't have a mind to create or a choice to create. So it must be a person with intelligence to create, to have the will to create. Not only that, but this first cause must be uncaused. This answers the question, who created God, which we'll get to in a second. This first cause, that first beginner, must also be uncaused. Why? To avoid infinite regress. Because if you say that this God was caused by another God, this God by another God, you will go to infinite regress. And mathematically, that's impossible. There must be a point of beginning, or else we wouldn't be here. Okay. Number 4, this first cause must also be changeless. The other term for this is immutable. It doesn't change, or he in this case doesn't change. Why? Because the first cause, as I said, is outside the dimension of time. which means he is not subject to cause and effect, which means they can't change. They're constant. Not only that, but that first cause must also be supernatural, outside of nature, as I mentioned to you earlier, immaterial. Since nature had a beginning and nature cannot create its own, he must be supernatural. So listen to this. Here are the characteristics of the first cause. He must be infinite, eternal, immaterial, all-powerful, uncaused, immutable, supernatural. These are the characteristics of the first cause based on physics and logic. And if you look at all these attributes, you come to, and I'm sorry, one most important one, he must also be a person to choose to create. These attributes look pretty darn close to the attributes of the God Christians worship as Jesus Christ. You see? As a matter of fact, if you listen to Abuna pray the liturgy, the Gregorian liturgy, and the reconciliation prayer, he mentions most of these. غير المحوى, غير المفحوص, غير المدرك, all of these. And many of our church hymns describe God in the negative. In the negative meaning, he is not that, not that, not that, because we can't describe in the positive because he's indescribable. Many of our church hymns, if you study them, you'll see these attributes, and in the liturgy as well. Any question on what we have said so far? All of this, and we just answered the first question. And we'll get to the second question in a second. Yes? No worries.
Or why I suppose it says cooling effect of radiation. I didn't get it. Number 4 in eternal. Cooling effect of radiation. Get it? Yeah. Cooling rate of radiation.
Don't ask me what these things mean, because I will admit my ignorance before anybody does. I do philosophy, and when it comes to physics, my knowledge is limited. I only know few of these, but the cooling, according to scientists, atheist scientists who have studied the cosmology phenomena, they came up with these 4 reasons why the universe had a beginning. Cooling rate of radiation, I would love to hear and learn from any scientist who is here in the audience. Anyone? Any scientist? Physicist? أنا بص, I will admit my ignorance. مش عاوز أفتي. You know what أفتي means? Okay. So sorry, I don't know. أخطيت. Go ahead.
This is a bit
And forgive me, and I feel bad saying this, so you made me want to research more on what that means so I can give an answer. So thank you for raising that question. Yes?
This is an incomplete thought, but like, it seems like we've taken the 4 ideas about creation, we've said why the first 3 don't work, and we've said that it must be created, but it seems like every reason that we've picked out for the 3 why they don't work, we've attributed to a creator. So could we possibly reverse that and say, I guess, all these reasons that we came up with, can't we use those exact same ones on the same idea of a creator? Like, it seems like we're kind of
Forcing the issue?
forcing the issue.
Yeah. Not necessarily, because I am not saying that this must be the Lord Jesus Christ himself. That will be the argument for, like I said, the second talk. I am saying that, all I'm saying is that these attributes makes me think that there must be a first cause, or this conclusion rather, makes me think that there must be a first cause with these attributes. And that makes me just think now, who amongst all the world religions will have all these attributes converge in them? You see what I'm saying? And that's the way we should operate with methodical thinking, yani building blocks. I first establish this conclusion, then I go to the second question to get that conclusion, then I get to this third question. First, does God exist? Then, to your point, is it Jesus Christ, or is it Muhammad, or is it Buddha? Then Jesus Christ. Well, what about Orthodoxy, Protestantism, Catholicism? That's another subject. فاهم قصدي? So I think this is the typical progression. If anything, that should make the atheist, God bless you, that should make the atheist rethink their atheism. You see, if anything, it will make them a little uncomfortable intellectually. Yes, sir. Ali Sota. Yeah.
How do you counter that? Okay, then the argument is saying, okay, but it was all random kind of thing that happened, and then everything spiraled from out there. How do you think? Like,
excellent. You know, this is a great question. I wish I go back to the second slide. Remember the 10 questions? The 10 questions. One of the questions, I think question number 4 or number 5. What is the meaning of life? I'll give you 2 answers to your question. First of all, those who say the universe came from the Big Bang, that's a pretty sorry explanation, because the Big Bang, one philosopher said the Big Bang requires a Big Banger. So in other words, there must be a beginner. Okay? So let me also tell you one more thing. Remember the question number 5, what is the meaning of life? Here's how it works. And if I would again, I would love to have some time with you to discuss that very, very question, which I think is extremely significant, the meaning of life. If there's no God, then everything has come to exist randomly, randomness. And if everything is random, then there's no design. And if there's no design, there's no purpose. And if there's no purpose, there's no meaning. That's why I would love to share with you what atheists said about the meaning of life. You know what they said? Life is meaningless, in short. One atheist by the name of Jean-Paul Sartre said, we are empty bubbles floating on the sea of nothingness. Another atheist by the name of Richard Dawkins, he said, you and I are happy chemical accidents. There's no meaning and purpose in this life. And many others said there's no meaning. So what would you rather have? A life without meaning because there's no purpose, there's no design, it's all randomness because there's no God? Or there is a God who actually have designed this universe and put purpose and meaning in your life and mine. You see? So there is a logical answer and there's an existential answer to your question. Yes, Justine. I'm sorry, you raised your hand first. Go ahead. Sorry.
Following up on the previous question and the answer, like many of these people, they're still smart people. Like they're living with some kind of meaning, whether it's meaningless for them, that's their meaning. It comes to the point where there's a God of the gap. Like they believe in the God of the gap, and whether like they're like we don't understand dark energy good enough, so that might be the explanation. Or
putting God in the yes.
Like how would we respond to that?
Again, another sorry excuse. I'll tell you why. We don't believe in the God of the gap theory. You know what the God of the gap is? If you don't have an explanation, just fill in God of the gap. Okay? We don't have God of the gap. We have evidence for God. It's not because we don't have an explanation, we just throw in God. No, it's because we have God and we have evidence for His existence, and that's what I'm presenting to you. So it's not that I don't have an explanation, it's that I do have an explanation, and this explanation is God. So look at it the other way. The evidence points to the existence of a creator. The evidence points to the existence of someone with these attributes. Come up with an alternative explanation for the existence of this universe, and then we can have a conversation. You see? Yes, ma'am. One second.
So earlier when you were answering someone else's question, you said, would you rather have a God that's not random, that's a creator, and you did the little chart thing, or would you rather not have that?
Sure.
The complete opposite.
Sure.
So I guess my question is, why, like, if I was an atheist, I probably would pick the one that's the least harmful. It's kind of like you asking, like, would you rather burn in a pool of fire, or would you rather burn in a pool of water? Like, I'm obviously going to take the one that's least harmful to my body. Right?
Sure. Well, excellent question. Now I need to ask you, what's your definition of least harmful to your body? And based on what did you come to this conclusion? Because as an atheist, you will continue to live in cognitive dissonance or inconsistencies in your life. As an atheist, you will live your life in inconsistency. And I can tell you this, and I'm glad you brought up this question. I can share with you famous atheists, and maybe I can do this next. Famous atheists, renowned atheists, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know who they are. And what they said at the moment of truth. You know what that moment of truth is? On their deathbed. And I'll share this with you. On their deathbed, they realized that they have been living a lie, and they could not continue living this lie while they were dying. They came up with the realization that there must be a God. And what's your name?
Tanya.
Sonia?
Tanya.
Tanya, I'm sorry. So I will share this with you in the next segment. Yes, sir. Speak in the mic, please.
So like, let's say the Buddha people, they could have done that same thing, just come to the conclusion that it's their Buddha. How do we know that it's our God, the right one?
Excellent. Are you gonna be here until 1 o'clock?
I think, yes.
Perfect. This question will be answered at 1. That's the second part of the question. Yes, Justina, and then you.
So you said atheism, their ideology is that they don't have free will. But then when you ask an atheist, why don't you believe in God, is I want to have free will. So doesn't that... So atheism, you said their ideology is based on they don't have free will. So they're trying to fight for free will. But when I ask an atheist, why don't you believe in God? And they're like, I want to have free will. So it contradicts. So what is going on?
The inconsistency that I was mentioning earlier is that here's a statement. They believe in the first half and they don't practice what they preach in the second half. They say, I don't believe in free will except how I freely arrived at that conclusion. You see what I'm saying? I had a conversation with an atheist one time when it comes to free will. It was at a conference somewhere, I forget. And then I said, let me ask you this question. What are you made up of? يعني انت composition بتاعتك ايه? What is it? And in short, he's made up of physics plus biology plus chemistry. مش كده? Like they say, molecules in motion. That's my makeup. My mind is made up of these 3 components. So I told him, excellent. What am I made up of? According to your belief. Me, my mind. He said, well, it's the same thing. Some physics, biology, and chemistry. قلت له, do you believe in determinism? يعني you are programmed with your makeup to arrive at atheism, right? He goes, absolutely. I said, I have a question. If we have the same composition, why did I arrive at a different conclusion than yours? Because I should also be an atheist. Because I should also be programmed, predetermined to believe in atheism. And there was no answer to this question. Let me share with you another story. I can tell you stories all day long. I was at a university, and I think it was UC Berkeley. You're familiar with UC Berkeley in the States. And it's only 20 minutes from my house. You've been? Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. So, and a pretty liberal university. And I had a lecture on the existence of God. And at the end of the lecture, some students, along with their professor, came, very intellectual students, and they came and they said, we're atheists. We don't believe a word you said. I said, حلو خالص. Okay, let's have a conversation. I want to ask you simple questions. تعالوا نقعد كده, because remember St. Peter says what? St. Peter said in 1 Peter 3:15, always be ready to give a defense. But at the very end, he said what? With meekness and fear. بوداعة وخوف. So let's have a loving, civil conversation. I said, I'll ask you a couple of questions. Very simple, intuitive, fundamental questions. Where did the universe come from? Now I have 10 questions I could have asked. I just said 2. Where did the universe come from? They said, we don't know yet. But cosmologists are continuously working hard to come up with the answer to this question, and eventually they will arrive at an answer to this question. Cosmologists, cosmologists who study the universe, not cosmetologists, cosmologists, okay? Anyways, and the second question, I said, oh, so you'll find out the answer to this question. Do you know the biggest atheist, or the most vocal, aggressive atheist in our time is Richard Dawkins. He was asked this question, and guess what he said? We don't know yet. Don't ask this question, we don't know. The universe just is. Okay? Second question, where did life come from? Because according to the law of biogenesis, bio means life, genesis means origin, so the law of biogenesis, championed, advocated by Louis Pasteur, who invented the pasteurization of milk, and he's a famous scientist. This law says life can only come from a life source. Life cannot come from non-life. That's a law. In science, that did not come up with it. According to this law, where did the first life come from? Here's their answer. They looked at each other and they said, well, there are a lot of efforts, work being conducted now in England, in Oxford, which is true, the Symposium of Life, seminars and all of that. They're discussing how we can understand the origin of life. Eventually, we'll understand how life came about or was created. So I told them, my friends, it seems to me that you live by faith. And I kid you not, I wish I had a video camera to videotape their reaction. There was a pin drop silence, because that word faith to an atheist is a bad word. Don't use that word. I said, you live by faith, because you keep telling me, eventually, in the future, I have faith that we will do this, we'll have that. I said to them, I also live by faith. And I do have answers to these questions. Are you interested to listen? And they got up and left. This is a true story. That atheism adheres to this blind faith that cannot come up with logical answers to these questions. We as believers in God, as Christians, we actually have the truth on our side. We know what the answers to these questions are, and they don't just make spiritual sense to us, they make logical, intellectual sense as well. It is not anti-scientific. There is the conversion of reason and faith together with these answers. So this brings me to, and I didn't forget the point that I shared with you, which is the what atheists said on their deathbed. So let me just go to that real quick, and then we can end with this for the sake of time. I have this here for you. Oh, here they are. Famous atheists and their struggle for God's existence. And you'll recognize some of those names. Because, you know why I wanted to share this with you? Also to answer your question, and also to answer the question that says, listen, I am a non-believer, I don't believe in God, I'm an atheist. Please, don't shove your God down my throat. I'm happy. Leave me alone. Do your thing. You do you, I do me kind of thing. You know what I mean? Leave me alone. I don't need your God. I meet people like that all the time. I'm sure you all do. But believe me, my friends, believe me, these words are coming from their lips, not from their heart. There will always be that void that cannot be filled or fulfilled except by their Creator. And let me share with you, these are excerpts from famous atheists on their deathbed and what they said. First, Jean-Paul Sartre, as I mentioned to you, the famous atheist, in his work, Words, he said, I needed God. I reached out for religion. I longed for it. It was the remedy, the cure. Had it been denied me, I would have invented it myself. He also said, I do not feel that I'm the product of chance or speck of dust in the universe, but someone who was expected, prepared, prefigured, in short, a being whom only a creator could put me here. This is coming from Jean-Paul Sartre on his deathbed as an existentialist or an atheist. Albert Camus, another French existentialist, he said in The Fall, "For anyone who is alone, without God and without a master, the weight of days is dreadful." Bertrand Russell said, "Something in one seems to belong to God. I care passionately for this world and many things and people in it. And yet, what is it all? There must be something more important, one feels, though I don't believe there is." Erich Fromm, the famous psychologist, said, "The need for an object of devotion is deeply rooted in the condition of human existence," in his work on psychoanalysis and religion. Lastly, Sigmund Freud, famous psychologist, in The Future of an Illusion, said, "It would be very nice if there were a God who created the world and a moral order in the universe and afterlife." What I can tell you with all of this is that you can deny God with the top of your mind all day long, but you cannot avoid Him from the bottom of your heart. Why is that? Because there's a verse in Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verse 11, that says, God, or He created eternity. Can someone finish? In our hearts. جَعَلَ الْأَبَدِيَّ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. He created eternity in our hearts. There will always be this void that money, possessions, hedonism, sex, drugs, alcohol, whatever you call it, will never fulfill. There will always be that yearning towards God. St. Augustine said his beautiful quote. You know, St. Augustine said, "You created us for yourself, and our lives will remain restless until they rest in thee, in you." So I hope this is clear. This answers the question of those atheists who say, "Don't bother me, I am totally fine." No, they're not totally fine. There will be a moment where they will realize their void. Okay, any comments or questions on what we've covered? So many things. Any comments or questions? This is your time. Yes, sir.
So I guess this is more of a comment, and it was kind of relating to like George's question from earlier.
Where's George?
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
About the like randomness. So I've seen online a lot of atheists post this is like, oh, the odds of you existing is 1 in 10. Okay, so a lot of atheists are like, and they take this kind of with pride as well. They say, oh, you should be grateful. The odds of you existing is 1 over 10 to the 2 million. So that's like 2 million zeros. And it's like a tiny, well, the odds of anyone existing.
Okay.
And they say they take that with pride. And then like, so if you look at if you look at things from a random point of view, it's almost a 0% chance of something random existing.
Yeah.
If the tilt of the earth was half a degree off, there would be no life on earth.
Yeah.
If there was no moon, we wouldn't exist. If the sun was slightly bigger, we'd all burn.
Right.
So I guess like randomness is, as you said, it's like, it's faith.
Yep. And not only that, why take that greater leap of faith? That to me is a greater leap of faith. To believe in that versus the very salient, obvious evidence, I think it says something about not you having an excuse. Not you having a reason, but having an excuse instead. Because the question then, after what you've said, the question then, why, despite the evidence, why do people continue to reject God? And it boils down to this. John 3:19. If you read this verse, you'll know the answer. If someone can, on your mobile device, if you can come up with John 3:19, you'll know the answer to the question, despite the evidence, why do people continue to reject God? Do you have it? John 3:19. Someone has it? You can read it for us? Almost? Okay.
And this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil.
So the light has come into the world. Men rejected this light and loved darkness more than the light. Why? Because their deeds were evil, and the light does what to their deeds? Exposes that deed or these deeds. If you're sitting in your room and the light is turned off and it's dark, no one can see you, can say whatever, you can do whatever you want, anything that is sinful, thoughts, actions, whatever that is, nobody can see you. Now if someone comes and turns on the light, you're now what? Exposed. So you have two options. One is to stop what you're doing because the light has exposed you and you draw towards that light, you're drawn to it, or you get up and you just turn it back off. Seriously, that's what happens. So I always say there are three reasons. The most relevant one, predominant one, is the moral reason. There are some intellectual reasons. Those who are scientifically bent, who read without discernment, and they have to explain everything with science this and science that, and intellectual barriers to belief. Those who also have emotional barriers to belief. For example, I am angry at God because he allowed my young niece to die of cancer at the age of 3, something like that. I'm angry at God because of all the suffering in this world. And if you watch the movie God Is Not Dead, that's precisely the reason of the professor's atheism, angry at God. So there's intellectual and there's emotional, but most commonly apparent is the volitional or the moral reason. I want to live my life. Aish hayat, you know what that means? I want to live my life however I want. I don't want someone to tell me, do this, don't do that. Don't restrict my freedom. I want to live my life. So that answers the question, despite the evidence, why people continue to reject God. Do you have a question? Yes, go ahead.
So you had brought up one of the options as being like the universe is self-created, and then we were saying that that doesn't make sense because it can't be creating and then exist and not exist at the same time.
Correct.
But I feel like that argument can kind of be made similarly with the existence of a creator for him to be there. And then like for us to, and then like our explanation is that just like God is above that. But I think like if you were to take this from someone who doesn't believe in God and doesn't, like it just seems like, oh, we created this property of God, like, oh yeah, he's above that. So the contradiction that would exist for the universe doesn't count for God just because he's God.
Excellent. I think implied in your question is who created God? Because you say God created everything. He's the cause of everything. Well, who caused God? Am I reading your question right? Okay. Well, I did not just, to answer your question, I did not just say because the universe is immaterial. I'm sorry, the universe is made up of matter, time, and space, forgive me. I did not just come up with that idea that whoever created matter, time, and space must be immaterial, timeless, and spaceless. I did not come up with that. There's a law called the law of causality that says that the effect cannot be quantitatively or qualitatively greater than the cause. That's a law of science, and you can read up on it, the law of causality. If the effect has time, the universe, then the cause must be beyond time. And the only attribute that is aligned with beyond time is timeless or infinite. So that's the law of science that said that. That's to answer your first question. Second question, who created God? I say this argument, the argument that I presented to you, says this. The first premise says, everything that has a beginning has a cause. Now I made sure I add this word beginning. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. But God, by definition, is, as I said, beyond the dimension of time. Because he must have created this time. Because he's outside that dimension, according to the law of causality. If he's beyond time, then he has no beginning. And if he has no beginning, he's uncaused. You see? And here is the other third point I'll share with you to answer this question. Atheists believed that the universe is eternal to escape this infinite regress problem. There must be, Aristotle said it beautifully, the famous philosopher Aristotle. He said, I am searching for the unmoved mover. That's the quote he said. There must be an unmoved mover that moved every single thing in this universe. So there must be a first cause, or else we wouldn't be here. So who's that first cause? Atheists thought that the first cause was the universe. Because you've got to come up with, if there is something now, there must have existed something or someone eternally. Who is it? I say it's God. The atheists say it's the universe. Well, then we concluded that the universe did have a beginning, that there must be a mind, not matter. And I'll share with you something else here that I think it's worthwhile, which I call it the gift of existence. Here it is. It's somewhat philosophical, but I think it's relevant to what we're saying. Existence, our existence is like a gift given from the cause to the effect. Are you with me? Some premises I want to share with you. Existence is like a gift that's given from the cause to the effect. If no one has this gift, then the gift cannot be passed down. If no one has that gift of existence, then that gift of existence cannot be passed down. If there is no God who exists by his own eternal nature, then the gift of existence cannot be passed down. We wouldn't be here. But we received this gift. In other words, we do exist. Therefore, the conclusion of these premises, there must exist a God who does not have to receive that gift of existence like every other link in the chain of receivers. Do you see? And that philosophically proves that there must have been a first cause. And معلش سامحوني, give me one more second. Okay, I deleted it. All right. Okay. Forget it. It's okay. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Yes, David, Habibi.
So this is a long question. So
sorry, David. أبونا إحنا معادنا نخلص إمتى؟
This is a bit of a long question, so bear with me. So you have mentioned some of the quotes of J.B. Sartre, and one of his books was about the existentialism and humanism, and he was arguing a very rhetorical question, which is, if God existed, and he is timeless, and he existed before of all his times, and I'm going to recite what you have just said, existence is a gift. So if the existence is a gift, and he existed before, and he is the gift giver, why he didn't claim himself, what he didn't show up himself as the gift giver, and he just waited all of that time till the time of Moses or Jesus or Muhammad or whoever it is?
Yeah, good question. Do you have a copy of the Timeless Truth book? Okay, in the chapter 6 or 7, this is a philosophical problem called the hidedness of God. Some call it the hiddenness of God, but it's the hidedness of God. In other words, just as you said, why can't God just tell us, here I am, I'm not going to play hide and seek with you anymore, just worship me. I will alleviate all confusions. Okay, now, did you want to answer that question? Very good. We'll contradict with a few other things. Excellent point. But if in the book, I've written 5 pages on that subject specifically. First of all, you're making a false assumption. Before I even answer your question, you're assuming that God is hiding from us. But is he really? He's not. The problem is not with him not revealing himself. The problem is with me not seeing what he has been revealing all along. How did he reveal himself? I call it the 5 C's. In the book, I call it the 5 C's. First, creation. Romans 1. Creation. The creation, and as I think in the Psalms, the firmament تخبر بأعمال يديه. I forget what the word is in English. Okay? Creation. تحدث بمجد الله. Very good. Number 2, conscience. Conscience. That's Romans 2. Number 3, most perfectly, Christ. The perfect revelation of who God is. Number 4, the canons of the scriptures. The Word of God reveals who God is to us. And number 5, the church, the body of God, the body of Christ. So you have those 5 ways God has revealed Himself to us. Now, if I could read to you Romans 1, I don't have it here, but Romans 1 verse 21, it says, in 1 second, give me just 1 second. Romans 1:21 says, for since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, listen to this word carefully, are clearly seen, glaringly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. That's what St. Paul said. You can just look at the creation. God's fingerprints are all over this creation. My conscience, the Lord Jesus Christ Himself, the perfect revelation of the second person of the Trinity, the scriptures, and the church. Yes, Lydia.
Just about the causality point, some people argue that we don't know if the law of causality applies like in the singularity because the laws of physics break down at that point.
Go ahead.
So how do we respond to that?
Yeah. So why don't I do this? I will send you See, I'll tell you something. From experience. Most of your questions are questions that are excellent, good, thought-provoking questions, but they are the common questions that we usually get when it comes to the cosmological argument. The law of causality and how it applies only to physical entities. I will share with you oh, by the way, here, radiation background of the universe. There you go. Radiation background, cooling rate, there you go. So just FYI. I can study it more and share it with you later. But let me share with you this law of causality. Oh, there you go. Why don't I just share it with you? Or do you want me to go over it? Okay, because it's quite long, but it speaks directly to what you said. How can that be refuted? I'll share it with you offline. And if anybody's interested, I'm more than happy to share that with you as well. Or you can take a picture of it and then picture of the next slide as well. There you go. Any other question? I think we're all exhausted, mentally speaking. So thank you for your time and your attendance. I urge you to remain with us for the next talk, which I seriously believe it's far more important, in my opinion, believing the truthfulness of Christianity and answering the simple question, why am I a Christian?